Well, welcome, everybody. I'm Mary White, and I'm with the organization SCOPE, and a very special organization regarding history and the promotion of voting rights here in the United States. It's July 16th, 2020, and I'm here today with a very special guest, Sherry Levitas from California. So Sherry, welcome. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and where you grew up.
Good morning, or it's morning here. I'm Sherry Holbrook Levitas. In 1965, I was a high school senior in Shingle Springs, California, a very small town in the foothills in California.
Sherry, tell us, how did you first get involved with social issues? How old were you, and what caused you to want to be involved?
I'm not sure. I think it was probably church. When I was about in the 8th grade, I thought that being a missionary was a marvelous idea, that helping other people was a good thing. And my parents had encouraged me to be a good person. Once I
Made you want to join?
back to helping people. And I had watched Bloody Sunday and pretty much decided that was un-American, that it wasn't who we are, that kind of activity had to be stopped. And I saw SCOPE as a way of working on that.
What was Dr. King asking young people to do that summer?
He was asking college students, mostly white college students, to come to the South to register voters. Kind of with from the point of view that Black people obviously weren't managing to get the rights they deserved, and that if Black people were also involved, it might be different.
And tell us how your family and friends reacted to that.
My friend, and I'm sure we're through the whole experience, but they'd raised me right. And the birds had come home to roost, so to speak. They couldn't tell me I couldn't do what I wanted to do when obviously I was doing the sorts of things that they had taught me to do, try to take care of other people.
So tell us, Sherry, how long were you there, and what types of tasks were you assigned?
We got into Charleston in late June. We were there about a week, and then we were moved to a small community called Pineville out in Cotton Country, where there was nobody else except the only white people were 4 of us. I was assigned the youth group, which was really interesting since I had no idea what to do with the youth group. I was pretty young. Some of the local ministers, Black ministers, who really didn't think we should be there. The Black community in the beginning ignored us because I was basically in a community that was all Black. And so any pushback from them came at the end of the summer, because we ended up we changed our mission. We were supposed to register voters, but we weren't doing a very good job of encouraging people to get involved since we were white and just didn't move churches the way they needed to be moved. We asked for help, and SDLC sent a young man, Louis Bryant, who said we had to do direct action. That would work. We'd been told not to do that. You can't register voters from inside of a jail, but we did it, and it worked. That's when the white community decided we were a problem, because that's when the Black community started registering.
You indicated that you had some pushback. Were there times where did you experience any violence or danger? Did you go to jail? What were some of the more difficult aspects of this?
The group I was told was the Klan set fire to a church very close, well, within about 3 blocks of where we lived. Fortunately, we were able to get there, and so they only lost their book room and their administration building. A week later, the church where we were at church, Redeemer Reformed Episcopal Church, was burned to the ground. By the end of the summer, we were chased out of Monk's Corner, where they registered to vote, and we were driven off the road, and the young man, Louis Bryant, was beaten unconscious. And there were other times where we were chased and shot at.
And tell us about
on the way home from the church. We'd been told never to stand in where we were backlit by anything, because it would be easy to pick us off. So the church is on fire, we're all standing there watching it burn, until one of us realized that was pretty stupid. And we got in the car, we were chased home, and they shot at us when we were trying to get out of the car and get into the house. We went to a movie theater to try and get in. We were chased out of there, and we were shot at on the road. And I went into a restaurant, and I was chased out of there by a man with a machete. I wasn't even with Black people. They just knew who I was then.
Mm-hmm. Did you do demonstration or protests?
Not that many. We did go just before the Voter Rights Act passed. We did go to Charleston for a demonstration. Mostly, we were way out, away from everybody else. We were at least 50 miles from Charleston. So we did local things. We weren't involved.
Mm-hmm. Is there one story, Sherry, that stands in the memory about how you were received by the Black community, maybe one individual?
Her name was Rebecca Crawford. And I was, for some reason, I was canvassing by myself. Usually we had a Black partner. And I went to Miss Rebecca's house, and she did come to the door. And I said, I'm here, my name is Sherry Holbrook, I'm working for Martin Luther King. And she watched me, and she didn't say anything. And I finally said, have you registered to vote? Oh yes, she had. And I said, do you have your registration card? Oh yes. And she went inside, and I thought I'd never see her again. It was a long time before she came out, which isn't unusual. That happened a lot. And she finally came out and she said, well, she'd lost it. She never had one. But watching her after that, because I said, oh, we're going to register voters, come to the church on such and such a date. And she said, I'll be there. And I thought, no, you won't. But she was. And she got on the bus. We were on our way before she finally showed up. And she got on the bus. And she came, sat next to me. And she finally said, child, I ain't never registered. And it's like, really? Well, you will today. But she couldn't read or write and not in her name. So she said, come back and learn me what I need to know to register. And so a month later, I showed up and she said, look what I can do. And she took a stick and in the sand, she wrote her name. So she had gotten someone to help her learn how.
A memorable story from the white community of that time.
I really had very little contact with white people other than having them chase me or burn something I liked very much. No.
Okay. So what do you think you accomplished or learned from that summer?
Oh. I remember the missionary was there. And I remember thinking, well, I'm taking the right to vote to these people and their lives will be so much better once they learn to register or when they vote. I'm the one who learned. A lot of them did register. I realized how spoiled I was. And my folks were lower middle class. I realized that the wisdom that I was going to impart actually belonged to the people who were teaching me. I had never been with people who were poor. I had never had to learn about endurance. Or like when they burned the school at church the next week, the minister was telling everybody that we had to forgive these white people who would go so far as to burn down a church, and we had to pray for them, and we had to wish them well, and those of us who had come from the white people in the group were sitting there thinking there was a lot of guilt and a lot of anger and a lot of wanting to get even. It was wrong and we thought it was wrong and we weren't forgiving anybody. By the end of the summer, I understood why that was important. I also got a family out of it. And for me personally, that may be the most important part of what I got. And that is there's a family in Pineville, South Carolina that considers me one of their members. I'm Aunt Sherry to 3 generations of people. And I go back. One of the things about COVID that's been really hard is I was going back in May. And I don't know when I'll be able to see them all again.
In what's going on in today's climate, in view of what's going on in today's climate here in history with a lot of protests and the African-American challenges that they have here regarding equal rights and voting, how do you feel about that?
Time to time, I feel like my life's work is seriously in danger of being erased. I went into teaching so that I could teach kids the ones that I had learned in 65. And as each law goes backwards, and we get less rights to vote, I feel upset. But I did go to a protest, even though we weren't supposed to, in early June, and was amazed at the people that were there. 20,000 people, most of them young, most of them committed, most of them determined, and I hadn't seen that since the 60s. So there's a new generation. And that was what one of the signs said, you effed with the wrong generation. And I hope that's
Sherry, what would you say to anyone that doesn't want to vote? What would you tell
just
someone?
anybody.
Anybody that's not interested in voting. What would you say?
Well, they certainly can't complain about what's going on if they don't vote. Jefferson made it clear that if that democracy had to be cared for and watered well, and people had to get involved, and that it was the way to make sure that the government did what it was you wanted them to do. Of course, that's kind of hard right now to actually try and convince people is true, since the government doesn't tend to do what anybody wants them to do. But if you don't let people know what you want, they can't do it for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If there was one photo you wished you had from that summer when you went south to register Black voters, if you could have had one photo, what would that be? One visual image.
I'm very fortunate because I have photos of almost everything that I wanted to have. I had other people that were taking photographs, and I got them because I wrote a book. So I think I have what I want, but I think I was blessed because otherwise I wouldn't have them if other people hadn't taken them.
Can you describe to us perhaps your favorite photograph?
Well, my first response is Mrs. Crawford, Rebecca Crawford, standing in front of her house. But the second one, the one that I seem to get the most response to, is that I have a poster, a hand-done poster that was taken off of a fence post near where we lived, and it says on it, "Black men, don't let sundown catch you in St. Stephen." And that was right toward the end, just before we left. And I kept that because in the lower corner it said, the rest was written in red paint, but in the corner it said, "You too, Blondie." I suspect that not a lot of folks, a lot of girls, have a personalized Ku Klux Klan poster.
Very good. And Sherry, if there was one song or one phrase that is most memorable for you for that summer, or would sum it up, what would that be?
I think the first one that comes to mind is "We Shall Overcome," because it is what it is. But the other one, and the one that I finally saw people responding to, "We shall not be moved. We're here. This is it." And we're back to what I said about people. Who I can't hear you, John. Is your mic off? And I don't see you, Mary.
Okay, go ahead. You can talk now.
Sherry, the last question was about the favorite song, and you said, "We shall overcome, and I shall not be moved." Just
We shall not be moved.
We will not be moved.
We shall not be moved.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about the
About
song?
we shall not be.
Yes.
We shall not be moved.
Hmm? Yes.
I think that it represented the whole history of Black Americans from slavery up until the time that I ended up in Pineville, because they endured. They came on slave ships. They went through that whole slavery experience, and they weren't bowed by it. They continued to well, endure is the word that keeps coming up. That whatever it was that happened, they overcame it. And I think one of the things that's important about it, and I've often been amazed by, was that the lack of violence,
Okay.
we shall not be moved, and we will not be pushed to doing something violent and be pulled into this ugliness that you have given us as a nation.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing your experience with us. Okay. So we'll stop the recording there. All right. Thank you. So, thanks, Sherry.